My father put me up for adoption as a baby. Now he's demanding half of the $3 million trust fund my adoptive family left me. Your encouragement keeps us telling stories. Show support by subscribing, and while you're here, let us know where in the world you're watching from. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after I buried my adoptive mother. I was still wearing her favorite cardigan, the lavender one that smelled like her jasmine perfume, when I signed for it. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a lawyer's letterhead and words that made my blood run cold: paternity claim and estate distribution. A man named Darren Monroe was demanding half of my $3 million trust fund. Darren Monroe. My biological father. The man who'd surrendered me at 6 weeks old. I'm Simone Laurent, 28 years old, and until that moment, I thought I understood my story. The Laurents adopted me when I was 3 months old. They were older, wealthy, and couldn't have children. They gave me everything: private schools, summer camps in Martha's Vineyard, a college education at Spelman. But more than that, they gave me love. Real love. The kind that doesn't count costs or keep score. My mom, Patricia, died of pancreatic cancer in November. My dad, Richard, passed 2 years before from a heart attack. Their deaths left me with grief, memories, and a substantial trust fund they'd carefully built for my future. I'd been using it to open my own marketing firm, something Mom always encouraged. Now this stranger wanted to take half of it. Based on biological rights, the letter claimed. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring with tears of rage and disbelief each time. I called my lawyer, Denise Morrison, within the hour. She'd handled my parents' estate and knew every detail of the trust. "Simone, breathe," she said when I finished my panicked explanation. "Send me everything. I'll review his claim." While waiting for her callback, I did what any millennial would do. I stalked Darren Monroe online. What I found made my stomach churn with disgust. Darren wasn't some struggling father filled with regret. He was a 52-year-old real estate broker living in Clayton County, driving a BMW and posting photos from his boat trips. His Facebook was public, filled with pictures of barbecues, fishing trips, and 3 other children, 2 sons and a daughter, from his 20-year marriage to a woman named Keisha. He'd built a whole life, a complete family, and never once looked back for me. Not one birthday card. Not one attempt at contact. Nothing. Then I found the comment that made me screenshot and send it to Denise immediately. Under a post about property investments, someone asked about his secret to success. Darren replied, "Know when to cut losses and when to double down. Some investments don't pay off right away, but patience and timing are everything." My hands shook with rage. Was I the loss he'd cut? Was this trust fund the payoff he'd been patient for? Denise called back that evening. "It's complicated, Simone. Georgia law gives biological parents certain rights, but the trust was specifically structured. We need to understand what triggered this. How did he even know?" That question haunted me for days. Then I remembered Mom's obituary. I'd written it myself, heartbroken and detailed, listing her survived family members and mentioning the trust she and Dad established to ensure their beloved daughter Simone's future success and security. The obituary ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, online and in print. Darren must have seen it. He'd been watching, waiting like a vulture circling. I contacted the adoption agency that facilitated my placement, Creative Beginnings Adoptions. The director, Mrs. Chen, was sympathetic but limited in what she could share. "Your file shows a voluntary surrender by Darren Monroe and Janelle Monroe, your biological mother. Both signed termination of parental rights documents. That should be binding." She paused, her voice softening. "Simone, I shouldn't say this, but I remember your case. Your biological father didn't visit you once during the 3 months you were in foster care. Not once. 3 months. I'd spent 3 months in the system before the Lawrence found me. Darren couldn't be bothered to see his infant daughter for 90 days, but now he wanted $3 million. The hypocrisy was staggering. Mrs. Chin sent me copies of the surrender documents. I stared at Darren's signature, bold and confident, signing away his rights to me with apparent ease. Below it, my biological mother's signature was shakier, reluctant. That night, I made a decision that would unravel everything. I hired a private investigator named Trevor Banks. Find out everything about Darren Monroe, I told him. And find Janelle Monroe too. Trevor was thorough and fast. Within a week, he'd compiled a dossier that made the betrayal even deeper. Darren had convinced my biological mother, Janelle, to give me up when she wanted to keep me. She was 19, he was 23. They weren't married. According to records Trevor obtained from mutual acquaintances, Darren told Janelle he wasn't ready for the responsibility, and that keeping me would ruin both their futures. He pressured her relentlessly until she agreed. Then 6 months after surrendering me, Darren married Keisha. She was already 4 months pregnant with their first son, Brandon. Trevor's report included the marriage certificate and birth certificate. The timeline was damning. Darren had gotten Keisha pregnant while Janelle was still pregnant with me. He'd abandoned one child to start a family with another woman. The casual cruelty of it made me physically ill. I threw up in my kitchen sink, Mom's cardigan still wrapped around my shoulders. But Trevor's findings got worse. Janelle had struggled after giving me up. She'd attempted to contact Darren multiple times in that first year, asking if they could get me back. He'd refused, eventually blocking her number. She'd spiraled into depression, dropped out of community college and moved away from Atlanta. Trevor found her in Savannah, working as a nurse's aide at a nursing home. She'd never married, never had other children. She'd spent 28 years living with the grief of losing me. There's more, Trevor said when he called with the update. Darren is in financial trouble. Bad investments, 2 mortgages underwater, and his oldest son's private college tuition is bleeding him dry. This isn't about reconnecting, Simone. This is purely about money. Against Denise's advice, I called Darren. I needed to hear his voice, to understand what kind of man demands money from the child he abandoned. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and practiced. Simone, I've been hoping you'd reach out. This legal approach, I didn't want it to be this way. But we should talk, daughter. Family should talk. Daughter. The word tasted like poison in my ears. You're not my family, Darren. You signed papers saying exactly that 28 years ago. My voice was steady though my heart raced. I'd practiced this conversation 100 times in my head. What do you want? What I want. He laughed, a sound without humor. I want what's fair, Simone. I'm your biological father. That trust fund, half of it came from my DNA, my contribution to your existence. Your adoptive parents are gone, rest their souls, but that doesn't erase my rights. The audacity was breathtaking. His DNA, as if genetics alone entitled him to wealth he'd never worked for, given to a daughter he'd never raised. You terminated your parental rights, I reminded him, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You walked away when I was 6 weeks old. You never checked on me, never sent birthday cards, never wondered if I was alive or dead. And now that my real parents, the ones who actually raised me, left me their money, you suddenly remember you have a daughter. Darren's tone shifted, hardening. Listen, I was young and made a difficult choice. I'm trying to make amends now. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice. The hard way came faster than I expected. 2 days after our phone call, Darren filed an official lawsuit. Not just for half the trust fund, but for emotional damages, totaling an additional $500,000. The claim argued that the Lawrence had alienated him from his biological daughter, preventing a relationship. It was absurd revisionist history that made my blood boil. My hands shook as I read the filing in Denise's office. "This is aggressive," Denise said, her jaw tight. "He's gambling that you'll settle to avoid a public trial. These cases can get ugly, Simone. He'll drag your parents' names through the mud, question their motives for adopting you, imply they bought you. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of my mother, how she'd sat with me through every breakup, every failure, every triumph. How my father taught me to drive, to negotiate my first salary, to stand up for myself. Their love wasn't transactional, it was foundational. I wouldn't let Darren sully their memory with his greed. "I'm not settling," I said firmly. "I want to fight this. What do we need?" Denise outlined the strategy. Prove Darren voluntarily terminated his rights without coercion, demonstrate his complete absence from my life, and establish that the trust fund was specifically the Lawrence marital property, created through their earnings and investments. We'd need witnesses, documents, and potentially testimony from the adoption agency. That night, I received a Facebook message from Brandon Monroe, Darren's eldest son. "My dad says you're being selfish. That money should help the whole family, not just you. You were raised rich, we need it more." The entitlement was staggering. This stranger, this half-brother I'd never met, felt entitled to my parents' money. I blocked him immediately, but the message festered. Darren had sicked his children on me, painting me as the villain in his narrative. I needed the truth, and only one person could give it to me. Trevor provided Janelle's address in Savannah, a small apartment near the hospital where she worked. I drove down on a Saturday morning, my anxiety building with every mile. What do you say to the woman who gave birth to you but couldn't keep you? The woman whose grief shaped 28 years of her life? She answered the door wearing scrubs, her face showing surprise and something else. Recognition. She had my eyes, my nose, my chin. The resemblance was undeniable and unsettling. "Simone," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Simone." She started crying immediately, reaching for me before pulling back, uncertain if touch was welcome. I found myself hugging her, this stranger who was also my mother, and we both sobbed on her doorstep. Inside her modest apartment, surrounded by photos of me, photos she'd somehow collected over the years from Facebook, from my private school's website, from my college graduation announcement, Janelle told me everything. "Darren said we were too young, that I'd ruin my life if I kept you. He was so convincing, so sure. I was 19 and scared, and I believed him." Her voice cracked with decades of regret. "But when I signed those papers, something in me died. I've thought about you every single day since." "Did you know he was with Keisha?" I asked, needing confirmation. Janelle nodded miserably. "Not at first. I found out about Brandon when he was born. Darren had already moved on, started his real family. I tried to get you back, but the adoption was finalized. The Lawrence, they seemed like good people, Simone. Did they treat you well?" Through tears, I told Janelle everything about my childhood, my parents, my life. She listened with a mixture of grief and relief, crying at stories of my first day of school, my college graduation, my mother's death. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." But when I mentioned Darren's lawsuit, her sorrow transformed into rage I didn't expect. "He's suing you? For money?" Janelle stood abruptly, pacing her small living room. "That son of a bitch. That's exactly who he is. He only cares about money. Always has." She grabbed her phone with trembling hands. "I'm testifying. I don't care what it takes. I'm telling a judge exactly what happened, how he manipulated me into giving you up so he could play house with Keisha. He doesn't deserve a cent." Her fury was protective, maternal in a way I hadn't expected. This woman who'd lived with grief for 3 decades was ready to fight for me now. "Janelle," I said carefully, "why didn't you ever try to contact me after I turned 18? You could have reached out." Her face crumpled. "I was ashamed. I thought you'd hate me for giving you up. I thought you'd blame me. So I watched from a distance, proud of everything you became, but too scared to interfere with your life." We talked for hours that day, filling in 28 years of blanks. She told me about her parents, both deceased now, who'd been devastated when she gave me up. About her struggle with depression, her years in therapy, her eventual decision to become a nurse's aide to help others since she couldn't help herself. "You deserved better than what I could give you at 19, she said. "The Lawrence gave you that. I'm grateful to them even though it broke my heart." Darren's deposition was scheduled for a Thursday morning in downtown Atlanta. Denise had prepared me for the theatrics, but nothing quite captured the audacity of watching Darren Monroe swagger into the conference room wearing an expensive suit, smiling like he'd already won. He nodded at me as if we were old friends. "Simone, good to see you." I didn't respond, keeping my expression neutral as Denise had coached. Under oath, Darren spun a narrative so divorced from reality it would have been funny if it weren't so offensive. He claimed he'd wanted to maintain contact with me, but the Lawrence had shut him out. He said he'd tried to send gifts that were returned. He portrayed himself as a grieving father denied access to his biological child, rather than the man who'd signed termination papers and moved on without looking back. "Mr. Monroe," Denise said coolly, "you claim you attempted contact. Do you have any evidence? Letters, receipts for gifts, phone records?" Darren shifted in his seat. "It was a long time ago. I didn't keep records. But I tried. My wife Keisha can confirm it." Except Keisha couldn't confirm it because it never happened. Denise produced the adoption agency records showing 0 contact attempts, 0 inquiries about my well-being. "And Mr. Monroe, when exactly did you become aware of the trust fund's existence?" Denise asked. Darren hesitated, realizing the trap. I saw the obituary. It mentioned Simone being cared for financially." Denise smiled slightly. "So you initiated legal action 3 weeks after Patricia Lawrence's death, having made no contact with your biological daughter for 28 years, immediately upon learning about her inheritance. Is that accurate?" The room was silent except for the court reporter's keyboard. Darren had just admitted this was entirely about money. When Janelle took the stand 2 weeks later for her deposition, I saw Darren's confidence crack for the first time. He hadn't expected her. She'd cleaned up beautifully, wearing a simple navy dress, her hair styled, her bearing dignified despite her obvious nerves. When asked to describe the circumstances of my surrender, Janelle didn't hold back. Her voice was steady, clear, devastating. "Darren told me keeping the baby would ruin both our lives. He said we were too young, too poor, that I'd end up on welfare and the baby would suffer. He pushed and pushed until I agreed." She looked directly at Darren, her eyes hard. "What he didn't tell me was that he'd gotten another woman pregnant. That he was planning a life with her, a life that didn't include me or our daughter." Darren's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting her memory was faulty after so many years. But Janelle had kept everything. Texts, emails, phone records from when she tried to reach him that first year after my adoption. She'd documented his refusals, his blocked numbers, his eventual threat to get a restraining order if she didn't stop harassing him. The paper trail was damning, painting Darren exactly as he was. A man who'd abandoned his inconvenient child and never looked back. "Ms. Monroe," Denise asked gently, "did Darren ever inquire about Simone's well-being after the adoption was finalized?" Janelle shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Never. Not once in 28 years. I kept track of her because I'm her mother and I never stopped loving her, even from a distance. But Darren? He forgot she existed until he smelled money. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. Darren's children, my half-siblings, began a social media campaign that backfired spectacularly. Brandon, 27, posted a long Facebook rant about how I was hoarding wealth while family struggled. His sister, Destiny, 23, created a TikTok calling me selfish and entitled. Their younger brother, Darren Jr., 19, sent me threatening direct messages. They painted themselves as victims of my greed, their father as a misunderstood man seeking connection. But social media cuts both ways. My college friends rallied, posting about my mother's cancer battle and how I deferred my business dreams to care for her full-time during her final year. My former colleagues shared stories of my charity work, the scholarship fund I'd started in my father's name. The narrative Darren's children tried to create crumbled as people who actually knew me pushed back hard against their manufactured victim story. Then someone leaked the court documents online, probably from Darren's side, hoping for sympathy. Instead, public opinion turned viciously against him. The details of his abandonment, his immediate subsequent marriage, his zero contact for nearly 3 decades, all became public knowledge. Twitter threads dissected his audacity. Legal analysts on YouTube called his case morally bankrupt and legally dubious. Darren had wanted to paint me as the villain, but he'd become the cautionary tale. One comment on a Reddit thread captured it perfectly. This man threw away his baby, built a whole new family, ignored her existence for 28 years, then showed up with his hand out when she inherited money from her real parents. The absolute audacity. I hope the judge laughs him out of court. That comment got 40,000 upvotes and became a rallying cry. Darren's reputation was destroyed. The trial lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. Judge Eileen Anderson, a stern woman in her 60s with no patience for nonsense, saw through Darren immediately. She reviewed the termination of parental rights documents, the adoption records, and the complete absence of contact. She listened to Janelle's testimony, to my account of my parents' love and sacrifice, to Darren's flimsy justifications for his sudden interest in my life. Mr. Monroe, Judge Anderson said, her voice cutting through his lawyer's arguments, you voluntarily and permanently terminated your parental rights to this child. You cannot now, nearly 3 decades later, claim those rights should entitle you to her inheritance from the parents who actually raised her. The trust fund was created by Richard and Patricia Lauron from their marital assets. You have no legal or moral claim to it. Darren tried to interrupt, but the judge raised her hand. Furthermore, your claim of alienation is contradicted by every piece of evidence presented. You made no attempt to contact your biological daughter. You built a life that excluded her entirely. This lawsuit is nothing more than opportunistic greed, and this court will not reward it. The gavel came down and I felt something break loose in my chest. Relief, vindication, grief for my parents who weren't here to see justice served. But Judge Anderson wasn't finished. I'm awarding Ms. Lauron court costs and attorney fees, to be paid by Mr. Monroe. Additionally, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order preventing any member of the Monroe family from contacting Ms. Lauron without her explicit written consent. This matter is closed. Darren's face went red, then pale. He'd gambled everything on intimidating me into settling, and he'd lost spectacularly. As court adjourned, he tried to approach me, but Denise stepped between us. Don't even think about it, she said coldly. 6 months after the trial, my life has found a new equilibrium. My marketing firm is thriving. I named it Lauron and Associates, honoring the parents who gave me everything. Janelle and I have built a cautious but genuine relationship. We have dinner once a month, slowly learning each other, grieving what we lost while appreciating what we've found. She'll never replace Mom, and neither of us expects that, but she's become someone important in my life. Darren sent one final message through his lawyer, requesting reconciliation, now that the money was definitively off the table. I declined through Denise, maintaining the restraining order. Some bridges once burned should stay ashes. His children have stopped their social media campaigns, presumably realizing they'd made themselves look terrible. I've blocked them all, protecting the peace I've worked so hard to build. The trust fund remains intact, a testament to my parents' love and planning. I've used part of it to establish the Patricia Lauron Memorial Scholarship for adopted children pursuing higher education. Mom would have loved that, her legacy helping kids who, like me, found families through love rather than biology. I've also donated to foster care organizations and adoption support groups. The money Darren tried to steal is now changing lives, just as my parents always intended. Sometimes, late at night, I still wear Mom's lavender cardigan and think about the journey from that certified letter to where I am now. I've learned that family isn't about DNA or biological connections. It's about the people who show up, who stay, who love you unconditionally. The Lawrence were my real parents. Darren Monroe was just a sperm donor who tried to cash in on a daughter he never wanted. I'm at peace with that truth now, finally and fully. My name is Simone Lauron, and I know exactly who I am and who my family was. That's something no lawsuit could ever take from me.